Okay. Well, it is 1:31. Do you want to go ahead and get started, Nadia?
Yes, let's do it.
Right on.
Hi, Rebecca.
Okay. Okay.
Yay.
So I'm going to do a quick introduction for everyone. Thank you everyone so much for joining us on our very first Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks mini BOW event. We're so thrilled that you could join us from across the state. We had just about 40 gals sign up for this, and I have a feeling that part of that might have been sign up, and we'll send you the Zoom link afterward because this is being recorded so we can share it with as many people as possible. And it just occurred to me the other day that we were doing this on the Friday of Memorial Weekend. So everybody else is probably out at the lake or doing something really fun with their weekend. So I appreciate everyone who could join us today and hang out with us online. But hopefully you have some fun plans for this weekend and you can get outside when we're done with all of this. But
Yes.
a little bit about myself. My name is Lyndzee Rhine. I work for the Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks. I'm the Outdoor Skills and Recruitment Coordinator. I'm also one of the BOW coordination team members. I've met a couple of you in the past, and I'm just really excited that you're all here. But I wanted to take a minute just to talk a little bit about mini bows. So not all mini bows will take the form of a webinar. Many of them will be in person. So if you haven't already, make sure that you sign up for the women's event notification list. And I'll drop a link to that in the chat and share it via email afterward, just in case you still need it. We'll send you information about upcoming events, including when registration will open for our regular BOW weekends. As the Kansas BOW program grows, we see the need for more mini events around the state. So be on the lookout for any that may be scheduled in your area. If you have an idea for a mini bow, or if you're even interested in teaching a class in your area, send me an email. I'd love to work with you and see if we can get something set up in your area. But without further ado, let's get this access party started. Today's event will focus on access opportunities here in Kansas, both on land and water, and ways you can utilize those spaces safely and legally. It's important to note that each state is different. So if you travel out of state, be sure to check the public land laws in those states. And I'm sure Nadia will probably mention that at some point throughout today's presentation. But I'm beyond excited to introduce our presenter for this afternoon, Nadia Marji. Nadia has been with the department for over 10 years and currently serves as the Chief of Public Affairs and Engagement Officer. And she's the first woman to be the executive editor of Kansas Wildlife and Parks magazine. So basically, Nadia is completely awesome and just kicks a lot of butt.
Thank you, Lynn.
Yeah, girl. I'm so honored to call her my friend and colleague. So not only do we work together at the department, but we're both hunter ed instructors as well. Nadia is a pro at teaching wing shooting and firearm safety. And some of you might even recognize her name. I've already seen a couple of things pop up in the chat from past BOW events, because not only is she leading today's event, but she also leads several classes such as fish cleaning and cooking and wild game cooking. And if you ever get a chance to try some of her wild game recipes, you are in for a treat because they are absolutely delicious. Nadia currently resides in Bonner Springs, Kansas with her pup Louie, or as I like to call him, His Majesty King Louie.
Yes.
I almost wanted to throw in King Louis the First, but then I was like, is he the first? I don't really know. So
No, I think he is. In fact, his full name is King Louis Octavius. So if we add in the first, it's even more regal that way.
oh my God, even better. Okay, well, that includes, we'll include Nadia's contact information at the end. We have time set aside at the end of the presentation to address any questions that come up throughout the event if you don't think of them when it's happening. But as the event takes place, feel free to just drop anything in the chat, your thoughts, your opinions, the questions that you have, and then we'll get to them, I promise. Also, myself and Nadia are the only ones who will see questions if they come through the Q&A section. So if you utilize that, Nadia and myself will be the only ones that see that. So they'll be relatively anonymous. So Nadia, are you ready to get started?
I am. Before we do though, we've already got a question in the Q&A. So I don't know if you want to tackle that now or at the end. It's asking about the difference between bow and women on target.
Yeah, we can answer that now if you'd like to.
Yeah, so I want to say, I think women on target events I think they're held by the National Wild Turkey Federation or NRA. Let me double check.
I think it is wild turkey.
Isn't it? Yeah. Okay, NRA.
Oh, no kidding.
Close. So NRA sponsors them. Yeah. Okay.
Nice.
So I'm gonna, is it Gina? I hope I'm saying your name right. We will find some information for you on that to see if we can see what's going on about why you haven't been seeing Women on Target events lately. But thank you. I did get the name right. Yay. But in terms of the difference between Bow and Women on Target, I've never participated on a Women on Target event, so I'm not 100% sure if it's just firearms related or if it's more broad. We can definitely speak to Bow. Lynn, I don't know if you have any familiarity with Women on Target.
No, I don't have any experience with it. I just know that it exists.
Yeah,
I would be very interested in researching it and learning more about it, so we can share that information with you with everyone at this once we get those answers figured out.
yeah, yeah. What I can say is Bow is amazing. It is a highly like it is an event where everything has been thought about tremendously and catered to the female attendee. It is a well-rounded event where I don't know where else you can go for, 2+ days and literally just pick myriad topics of things to learn about and get a good quality experience from every one of those classes. There are no shortcuts taken when it comes to Bow. And so I'm just saying the bar has been set pretty high. I don't know what they're able to offer in the way of Women on Target, but I feel like Bow is pretty there up at the top. So but we'll find some more information for you and we'll get back to you on that. Pinky promise.
Okay.
All right. Okay. So she added they do guns, archery, sometimes self-defense. Yep. And those are all included in Bow as well. We do rifle, we do pistol, archery, of course, water sports, foraging, outdoor photography, cooking, really run the gamut. Yeah, Rebecca's like, Bow is amazing, dare I say, life-changing experience. Amen to that, sister. Yes. Okay. All right. Before we get too off topic, let's continue with access. So I think it's very fitting that we're having this discussion just in advance of Memorial Day weekend, because what better time to talk about how to get outdoors and enjoy the outdoors safely and legally in advance of a long holiday weekend. So hopefully you guys learn some things that you can implement as soon as this weekend. And if not, you'll have this information for years to come. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to briefly minimize my Zoom screen. So if you send a chat, I will not see it for a hot minute. I'm doing this so that I can pull up my presentation on Canva. So I'm going to start sharing my screen here. Let's see. Oh, I minimized too quick. Give me just a moment. Can you guys see my desktop or not quite yet?
Not quite yet, Nadia.
Okay, let me go back to Zoom. Hit that screen share first. Lynn, do you know where I can find that? Oh, start share. Okay, there's just not a quick button. All right. Look at us, problem solving like we always do. All right. How about that, girls?
Got it.
Beautiful. Okay. So this is my presentation. Yes, it's called Operation Access, but if you know me, you know I got to be a little bit extra with my presentations. So I'm renaming this How to Access the Great Outdoors Like the Queen That You Are. So again, for those who don't know me yet, my name is Nadia Marji, and like Lynn said, I serve as the Chief of Public Affairs and Engagement Officer for the Department of Wildlife and Parks. I'm going to tell you a few other things that we didn't already mention that I think are important for other people to know. Yes, I've been with the department a little over a decade now. Do I know a lot about the outdoors? Sure, I'd say enough to be dangerous. But I am by no means a professional at anything. I'm always learning. I think it's important to know I wasn't born in Kansas. I am a California girl at heart. I grew up near the Newport Beach area and in the Coachella Valley later. and lived in Palm Desert and then came to Kansas. So I am already non-traditional in that sense. I also did not grow up hunting and fishing. I have a few memories of going to the lake with my grandma and grandpa, obviously spent lots of time at the beach, but I was not introduced at an early age to outdoor activities. So I'm an adult onset hunter and angler and absolutely love it. And like I said earlier, yes, I work for Wildlife and Parks. And yes, I have all of these neat opportunities to share the knowledge I do have, but I will gladly start off my presentation by saying I still don't know everything. I think that's great because it means there's still things to learn, which I love to learn. So if you guys have questions or want to delve into topics that I don't have the answers for you today, I will gladly jot them down. I've already got my paper and pen handy. And if there's one thing I am a professional at, it is finding answers. So if we can't answer them today, we will get to them following the presentation. All right. So what in the heck are you going to learn from me then? Well, there's three things that I really hope you come away with from this presentation. The first is where you can go to recreate in Kansas. The second is how can you do it legally? Because of course, none of us want to go out and get in trouble. And then the last thing is the resources that are available to you that are going to make you a queen of the outdoors. And I'm proud to say that my shop, the public affairs section at Wildlife and Parks, is largely responsible for the majority of these publications, along with our fish and wildlife divisions and public lands. So you can also rest easy knowing that the resources I'm pointing out, I have intimate knowledge of those and how they're put together. And also they're largely produced by female staff. So how cool is that? Very fitting for a mini bow event. All right. So before we get into the nuances of accessing the outdoors, I think it's really important to understand who are the key players when it comes to all of this. This can be kind of confusing, and I don't expect you guys to remember all of this information. But it is important to know, especially when it comes to rules and regulations or laws, that sometimes they come from the federal or national level. Sometimes they're set at the state level, and sometimes there's local sanctions. When it comes to the federal or national level, some key players that you likely have heard about or will hear about the more you get involved in the outdoors are the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the Bureau of Land Management, the Bureau of Reclamation, and entities like the Nature Conservancy that aren't necessarily a government organization, but they operate at the national level. When it comes to state entities, you're going to hear about organizations like the Kansas Recreation and Park Association, us, which, I mean, really, it doesn't get better than this, but I know I have to share, okay, Wildlife and Parks, and entities like the Kansas Forest Service. Some of these entities also operate at the federal or national level. For instance, there's a U.S. Forest Service. The Nature Conservancy operates at the state level. They have Kansas-based staff. And then to muddy the waters even further, we have local entities like the Johnson County Park and Recreation District. So do you need to know all of this in order to safely and legally recreate in the outdoors? Of course not. But I just want you guys to be aware that all of these entities do exist. There are layers of authority, and not everything is at the federal or state level. For instance, some people might think that the Department of Wildlife and Parks sets all of the rules for Kansas related to the outdoors. That is not the case. What I would call our mama bear is the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So they have their own rules and regulations. We have ours. And then say if you were to visit a lake within Johnson County, they might have their own permitting system or their own rules for their area as well. So we'll dive into this a little bit and focus on what you do need to know. So just to delve into this a little bit more briefly, to kind of show you how the layers of this cake work. Okay, well, that's great that there's people at the federal level all the way down to local, but what in the heck do they do? I want you guys to realize that it's not always very different. Sometimes we have the same mission, but we have different resources or different levels of authority. That being said, we all have a purpose that we're serving. So for instance, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is a federal agency. They're housed within the Department of the Interior, and they're dedicated to the management of fish, wildlife, and natural habitats. And that's at a national level. Here in Kansas, we have the Department of Wildlife and Parks, which is where we're employed. We're a state cabinet level agency, which means that we respond to the governor, and we're responsible for governing outdoor recreation and fish and wildlife resources. So you can see, very similar to U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And then again, as an example, entities like the Johnson County Parks and Recreation District, they're a county level park and recreation district that operates parks, facilities, and programming sites specifically in Johnson County. So you can see there's overlap, but we each serve our purpose. Okay, and then just look at this. This doesn't even skim the top of the water of the fat on that milk. These are the other key players. And when I say there are a lot, there are a lot. There's tons of non-government organizations, interest groups, social groups, volunteer organizations, some at the federal level, some at the state. It runs the gambit. So I just want you to know the natural resource conservation community is big, which means there's a lot of opportunities out there because of this. When we talk about Kansas, everyone knows that public land access is limited. This doesn't mean that opportunity is stymied to the point that they don't exist. You just got to know where they are. So like we said here, 97 to 98% of the state is in private ownership. Therefore, yeah, the struggle is definitely real. But thankfully, the organization we work for, we know this. So I'm going to show you how you can safely and legally access public lands for the purposes of hunting, fishing, water sports, and some other activities that don't necessarily lend themselves to the three already mentioned. When it comes to hunting, it's really important to know that there are different types of properties open to hunting. The first of which might, oh, and I've got a typo. Look at that. As an executive editor, my OCD is in overdrive. Somebody make note of this. We can just say this the rest of the presentation now. Wildlife areas. So the first to know is our wildlife areas. These are areas that are managed specifically for wildlife and hunting opportunities. At our wildlife areas, camping is often limited because it's not the primary purpose of the wildlife area, and they're almost always conveniently located right next to a state park. We also have what's called WIHA or IWIHA properties. WIHA stands for Walk-in Hunting Access Areas, and IWIHA is the Interactive WIHA program. Traditionally, these are properties that are in private ownership, so they still have a private landowner who has the deed and all of that goodness, but they're leased by us so that the public can go hunt on that land. On WIHA and IWIHA properties, special restrictions do apply because they're not open to the public year-round, and obviously we want to be respectful of the fact that we don't own these lands, So whatever accommodations we can make in order to allow the landowner to feel comfortable while still facilitating public access, we try to do that. And we always make sure whatever special restrictions apply are adequately included and advertised in publications that I'll talk about later on in the presentation. The last thing I'll mention when it comes to WEHA and iWEHA properties is that because we lease them, they are under contract periods. These are typically the same for all properties. However, because they're in private ownership, the landowners may unenroll at any time. So it's really important for us as conservationists and outdoor enthusiasts to make sure that we treat these properties just like they're our own, so that we may continue to have that opportunity to hunt and recreate there. And then there's also properties where you can go hunting that aren't owned or managed by the state and aren't leased by the state. They're their own private entity, and those are controlled shooting areas, or as we refer to them in the department, as CSAs. So again, these are privately owned facilities that typically stock game species for hunting. So it's a great opportunity to introduce youth. There's a high success rate, especially if you've never been out in the outdoors and you want to know whether or not it's worth investing in all of the equipment or upgrading those firearms or what have you, to see if you really want to make this a lifelong tradition. They definitely serve a purpose. These services are offered at a fee, of course, and it's important to know that state and federal rules still apply. So even though it's on private property, and even though you can still engage in the sport of hunting, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a free-for-all. So for that reason, you can know that these are a safe place to go to as well. They are required to be permitted by Wildlife and Parks. So if you ever want a complete list of CSAs, they are included in some of the publications I'll talk about, as well as on ksoutdoors.com. And Lyndzee, I can't see you, but give me a thumbs up or let me know. I think what I'll do is, after I conclude each section, hunting, fishing, water sports, and other, that might be a good time to pause for questions. What say you?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so you're like, that's nice, lady, but where are these places? Funny you should ask. That is one of the publications we produce. It's called a hunting atlas. If you've never taken one of these publications before, I highly recommend it. It's not what you would consider light reading. In fact, there's not much reading at all because it is mostly maps. And what this is a free publication offered by Wildlife and Parks that is available at nearly every licensed vendor, that allows you to see where all of the public hunting access is in the state, including the WEHA properties we just talked about. So this is lands that are owned or managed by the Department of Wildlife and Parks, as well as private lands that have been made open to public access. Okay, so what are the rules? Now you know where you can hunt. Now you have a publication you can reference that gives you the exact location, but what else is there to know? I'm going to break it down by the areas we just talked about, wildlife areas versus CSAs and so forth. So when it comes to wildlife areas, it's important to know you can't do any of these activities, and I will go over each of them with you. Target practice, dog training, horseback riding, stalking or releasing wildlife, operating a vehicle, fireworks, fires, littering, drinking, anything they deem as a destructive act, including digging, destruction or removal of signs or vegetation. And you might be wondering, well, heck, that's all the fun stuff, right? Why can't we do that there? When it comes to a lot of these rules and regulations, you have to go back to what is the purpose of the property? And the purpose of our wildlife areas, as we stated, is to benefit wildlife and create opportunities for hunting. So while some of these activities are absolutely allowed elsewhere, and I'll tell you where down the road, they're not necessarily allowed at our wildlife areas. So these are where we go when we want to go hunting or to see wildlife. When it comes to WIHA and iWIHA properties, like we talked about, there could be special restrictions in place that the landowner has imposed. But assuming that the landowner has not imposed any special restrictions, these are examples of the activities that are not allowed on WIHA or iWIHA: foraging, shed hunting, using a vehicle, or entering the property outside of the contract period, and using firearms in areas that have been designated for archery and shot shell only. Again, it's not that you can't do these activities anywhere, it's just that you can't do these activities on WIHA or iWIHA properties, again, because of the purpose of the property. The purpose of WIHA and iWIHA is to create hunting access. So the landowners who we work with are more than happy to provide hunting access, but they don't necessarily want people milling around or engaging in other activities or tearing up their land by driving a vehicle. So we ask that if you enter a WIHA or iWIHA property, that you don't engage in these activities. Like I mentioned before, they can be unenrolled at any time. And one question we get sometimes is, okay, well, how do I know that the WIHA or iWIHA property I'm going to is still in the program? And what we tell people is, if you get to the property and there are no signs up, do not enter the property. The best way to tell if a property has been unenrolled is there will not be signage that states that it's a WIHA or iWIHA property. We also have an electronic version of our atlas, and this is updated to reflect any properties that are unenrolled, but I'll let you know this happens very few and far between. It's not common, but just be aware that they can be unenrolled at any time. So hopefully there's no bad apples that ruin it for the rest of us. And just like on our CSAs, federal and state regulations still apply. When it comes to those CSAs, these are private properties. So to keep matters simple, I'll just say this: they have their own rules. And those are rules that I'm sure they have advertised on their websites or that they'll go over with you when you enter those properties. And I would say it's so varied, I'm not going to attempt to speak on behalf of them. But like I mentioned before, we do maintain a list of where CSAs are in the state, what their names are, and how to contact them. So here's an example of that URL. Again, this presentation will be made available after today, so you can enter that into your search engine, or just know that if you go to ksoutdoors.com and you click on hunting, you would just then click where to hunt, and there will be a list of CSAs. Okay, before we get into fishing, I'm going to stop sharing right here and just take a little moment to see if anyone has any questions about content that's already been covered. And I'm going to refill my amazing coconut lime drink while I wait.
I gotta try that sometime.
So it is like the Bahamas in your mouth. I know they say there's lime in it, but to be honest, I'm just getting coconut and it's beautiful.
Sounds refreshing. Not, I'm not seeing anything in the chat or in the Q&A.
I'm not either. You guys are easy participants. Okay, let me get back to my screen sharing and we will carry on. I'm listening. Hey man, I'm glad you're listening. Thank you. I'm listening to me too. Okay, here we go. Chapter 2. When it comes to fishing, I think it's really important, and especially if you want to sound super educated about fishing in Kansas, it's good to know that there's a difference between reservoirs, lakes, and ponds. People will use these terms interchangeably, but they don't actually mean the same thing. So if you can tell the difference between whether a water body is a reservoir, a lake, or a pond, you're going to impress some folks who, it's like, if you know, you know. So when it comes to reservoirs, these are bodies of water that are larger than 1,200 acres, okay? These are the big boys. The reservoirs that we have here in Kansas are man-made. There's a fun little fact that'll help you out at Buffalo Wild Wings trivia night, okay? These didn't just happen on their own. Of course, we're landlocked, right? So these are man-made structures specifically designed to collect water. They serve a multitude of purposes, but for the purpose of today's presentation, they're fantastic for fishing. The reservoirs we have here in Kansas are typically managed at the federal or state level, and they're located at nearly every state park. Something else I'll mention here is Kansas is kind of interesting, and I'm sure there are other states that are similar. I can't name them off the top of my head, but here in Kansas, we have some reservoirs where you actually get to benefit from 2 parks, a federal park and a state park. So the federal parks that you might encounter are owned by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, or some people just might refer to them as the Corps. But if you're ever trying to find information about a state park or a campsite, and for some reason you're not quite finding the right information, it could be you're going to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers for information about a wildlife and parks state park, or it could be you're contacting Wildlife and Parks about a state park that's actually managed by the Corps. So just know that there can be a little bit of confusion there, but all of the parks where they offer camping and other activities are almost always connected to a reservoir. Kansas has 28 state parks. I can tell you 2 of them are not connected to a reservoir. When it comes to lakes, we're referring to bodies of water that are anywhere from 10 acres to 1,200 acres. So these are the mid-sized water bodies. These can be managed at the state or local level. They're definitely located throughout the state, just like our reservoirs, but some of them do occur on private property. These are the people you want to become friends with. Anybody who has a private lake, befriend them, and quickly. And then there's ponds. Great opportunities at ponds too. These are water bodies that are going to be less than 10 acres, okay? So these too can be managed at the state or local level, and most of them occur on private properties. Okay, when it comes to fishing, apart from reservoirs, lakes, and ponds, there's also bodies of water that have been leased specifically for the purpose of fishing. Just like we have the walk-in hunting access program, we have the walk-in fishing access program. So we have we fly. It's a great time. So WEFA properties are privately owned ponds or even streams that our department has leased to create public fishing opportunities. So just like the WEHA program, which I failed to mention this earlier, these landowners are compensated. And just like WEHA, there is a contract period. So same thing as before, these landowners have graciously opened up their private property to allow the public to recreate. And therefore, to make sure that things are clean and orderly, we have a contract period that we all agree to. And again, those are adequately advertised and promoted in the publications that I'll continue to talk about. Another phrase that you might see or hear about are Community Fisheries Assistance Program areas, or CFAP. these are community lakes that are owned by a city or a county, but we manage them. So they create the opportunity. We make sure there's fish in them through our CFAP program. And these properties are special in that they typically have reduced or no additional fees to participate. The department has made it a priority to not let finances be a barrier to outdoor recreation. So where possible, we really try and form partnerships with cities and counties to make sure that people have a local body of water where they can go to fish, where they don't necessarily have to buy any permits or licenses above and beyond what the state already requires. That's not the case in every city or county. And so you might encounter a city or county lake where they do require their own license. I believe Johnson County is actually one of those. One thing I will mention is these cities and counties that do require an additional license or permit, they're not necessarily doing that because they think there is so much money to be made. Actually, some of these bodies of water are stocked with additional fish above and beyond what Wildlife and Parks has already supplied. So they might be offering more fish or paying for larger fish or specialty fish that wouldn't be possible to get otherwise. So just know when you buy that license or permit, that's typically what you're paying for. And you're like, Nod, that's nice and all, but where the heck are these places? Girl, I got you again. So just like we have a atlas for hunting, we also have one specific to fishing. So this includes all of the department managed waters, as well as the properties that we lease, private properties we lease for public fishing, and city and county lakes as well. So this is your one-stop shop that, again, is usually made available wherever licenses are sold, where you can flip through this atlas to determine where fishing opportunities may exist near you. This too is offered in electronic form, so you can also download it. Okay, so back to that part about those dang rules. When it comes to WEFA properties, there are some rules that you should be aware of. You're not and shouldn't enter the property, again, if signs aren't present. That's the best way to determine if a property has been unenrolled or for whatever reason is not participating in the program. So if the signs aren't there, don't enter. Our landowners are also told that people won't stray more than 50 feet off of the stream or the shoreline. Again, you have to think about the purpose of the property, and the purpose of the property is to allow fishing access. So theoretically, people shouldn't be wandering around, and also leaving trash behind. Unfortunately, we have to remind people that that's something you shouldn't do. And so at any rate, these are things to keep in mind if you're participating or enjoying a WEFA property. Now, there are some things that are flexible depending on the tract, and that is opening gates or entering with a vehicle. So you have to remember that these are in private ownership, and so people might have livestock that they're concerned about. They might have children in the area, all sorts of things. So some folks are going to ask that you don't open any gates, don't use a vehicle. Others don't mind, so long as you follow the rules that are in place. And again, those are going to be advertised in advance so that you know they're going to be in those publications and they're going to be on the property as well. When it comes to our Community Fisheries Assistance Program bodies of water, state and local rules apply. So that's important to know. If you're required to have a fishing license at one of our waters, you're required to have a fishing license for CFAP too. And just like I mentioned before, there could be a special permit or license that you have to get through that local municipality. It's not every city or county lake, but like I said, some of those that want to augment their stockings or offer opportunities that wouldn't be possible otherwise, they recoup some of their funds through a special license or permit. So all in all, your best resource for all things fishing related is going to be the department's fishing regulation summary. It's going to have all of that information in there. So let's take a quick break here before we get into water sports. Again, I'll stop my share and see if we have any questions related to fishing access.
To come in, I'm already learning so much from you, and this is
Are
amazing.
you? Good. Okay.
I felt like coming into this that I knew a decent amount about public access, but here I am like, oh, that's a new little nugget of information. I love that.
Good. I'm so glad to hear that. All right, girls, we'll get right back into it. Okay, so chapter 3, water sports. So I've told you about different areas that are accessible to you for hunting, different areas that are accessible to you for fishing. Okay, well, what about getting wet? That's something I hope we're all going to be able to do this Memorial Day weekend. The weather looks fantastic. I'm excited to get out. So just like we want to make sure that you sound like a queen and super educated when you talk about fishing or hunting, same thing when it comes to water sports. So it's really important to know that there are kind of 3 columns, 3 areas through which the department views water sports. There's water sports that require a motorized vessel. There's water sports that require a personal watercraft or PWC. And then there's all those vessels that don't have a motor. So it's important to know these classifications because that's going to dictate where you can recreate and what you might need in order to be considered legal to participate in that activity. It differs by what kind of vessel you're using and whether or not it has a motor. So for the purposes of talking about motorized vessels, we're referring to any vessel that's powered by a motor, including a trolling motor, okay? When we talk about personal watercrafts, these are vessels that have what's called an inboard motor, so you're not going to see it on the outside of the vessel. Powering a jet pump as their primary source of propulsion. So prime example is like jet skis or wave runners. When you see that big string of water coming out the back and they're peeing, that's what we're talking about. So personal watercrafts are those vessels that are designed to be operated while you're sitting, standing, kneeling, and you're on the vessel rather than inside of the vessel, like a boat. A boat, you're going to be inside of it. These, you're just kind of, you know, joining it from the top. So a personal watercraft. And then we have all of these beautiful non-motorized vessels that are not powered either by an external motor or inboard motor. Paddle boards, canoes, kayaks, float tubes, sailboards, the cabinet that from the Titanic, you know, that she was floating on. I mean, that's a non-motorized vessel. Kiteboards. If you're riding Nessie the Loch Ness Monster, and that's for you, Lyndzee, non-motorized vessel, okay? I'm seeing the chat. Nessie, yes, girl. You like that? I had to throw that in there. Why not? Okay. So, like I said, depending upon whether you're utilizing a motor or not, that's going to dictate what rules you need to know and where you can recreate. So, what are the rules? It's important to know that anyone between the ages of 12 and 20 has to have boater education if they want to operate a vessel without being under direct and audible supervision. So if they want to be able to go out on their own and they're between these ages, they've got to have boater education. I will say boater education is one of those classes like hunter education that although it's not required for everyone, I highly recommend it. There's a lot of fantastic information that can be learned. And I will say, when it comes to water sports, just like hunting, you can never be too safe. There are, kind of like driving a vehicle, rules of the road, some of them spoken, some of them unspoken, and you need to know all of them in order to operate safely on the road. Same thing when it comes to the water. So even though it's only required of this age group, for those who want to operate a vessel without supervision, I recommend it for everybody. So if you do decide to take boater education, it's good to know that just like hunter education in Kansas, it's offered in multiple formats. We have a home study packet that can be mailed to you. There's a plethora of online classes you can take. And then if you're really lucky, you'll get to benefit from one of our in-person classes that are held in a classroom type setting. I say that, but they're really outside, of course. This is also information that can be easily accessed on ksoutdoors.com, but I'll also show you another publication that'll help you out in regards to boater education. Another rule that you've got to know in order to recreate legally on the water is life jackets. So in Kansas, anyone who's 12 and younger has to wear a life jacket, non-negotiable. They have to wear it when they're on board a boat. And if you're over the age of 12, you have to have a life jacket readily accessible. So by readily accessible, what we mean is it has to be within sight and within reach. If it is hidden below deck in a cabinet, especially if it has some little locking mechanism, that's not considered readily accessible. If for some reason the vessel were to overturn or you were to find yourself unexpectedly in the water, you can't exactly grab that life jacket, right? Just like boater education is optional for those who are older, and just like life jackets are optional, I still highly recommend it. Unfortunately, one of the parts of my job that I just can't stand is having to write a news release or field media questions about somebody who has died because of a water accident. And it happens every summer. And unfortunately, it's not a stretch to say that that will probably happen this weekend. When we have people who are drinking, who are recreating on the water, accidents can and do happen. And I know everyone thinks it's not going to happen to them. They're a good swimmer. They're safe. Just like driving, it's not always about you. Sometimes it's about the other people who are in the area, and they might create an unsafe situation for you. So I highly recommend that everybody wear a life jacket. So when we say that you have to wear a life jacket while on board a boat, it's good to know that in Kansas, sailboards, kayaks, canoes, and paddleboards are considered boats. So interpret that as you may. Okay, so more rules. When it comes to motorized vessels, things get a little more complex simply because it's a bigger watercraft. It has the ability to travel faster, carry more people. And so there is a required checklist of equipment that you have to have on the boat. We understand that when it comes to kayaks and canoes and paddle boards, you don't need all of these things. There's typically just one, maybe two people on board. It's smaller, it's not motorized. But when it comes to the big boys that are motorized, there's certain things that you have to have on the boat in order to be considered legal. Boater education certificate, boat numbers and decals. You have to have sound producing devices, fire extinguishers, navigation lights. Should you find that you want to recreate at nighttime or you're having to get towed in, back flame arrestor, ventilation, and the list goes on. So this information is available in a publication that I'm going to talk about. There's also an interactive checklist that you can fill out on ksoutdoors.com. I actually played around with it a couple days ago. And what you do is you designate what type of watercraft you plan to use, And whether or not it's motorized, it will give you a list of what you need in order to be considered legal. So it's super handy. And there's even an easy print button. So based on what you're going to be recreating on or in, it'll let you know exactly what you need. So that's super handy. One other thing that I think you should know when it comes to water sports. When we utilize reservoirs, lakes, it's easy to understand whether or not those are open to public access. Of course they are. That's the purpose of those properties that we make available. But it gets a little tricky when we talk about rivers and streams. In Kansas, you should also know that most of rivers and streams in our state are privately owned. So this shouldn't necessarily come as a surprise because, again, remember we talked about Kansas is 97 to 98% privately owned. So naturally, the majority of our waterways are also in private ownership. So this is important to know because if you want to access some of those rivers and streams, you have to get permission to use the waterway and the adjacent lands. So what this means is, oh, there's this super cool stream in my area. I really want to kayak it. I know the landowner on this side, so I'm going to get permission from them. Well, you have to understand those waterways typically connect to two properties, one on each side. So unless the landowner who you've gotten permission from owns both sides, you've got to also get permission from the adjacent landowner. It's good to know, though, there are public rivers in Kansas, and those are the Kansas, the Arkansas, and the Missouri rivers. And even better, public access points do exist. So you're like, again, nod, that's nice. Where do I do this? There is a awesome boating access map that we have on ksoutdoors.com, and you can find areas near you to boat, kayak, all sorts of things. And here's that handy dandy resource I was also telling you about. So this regulation summary has everything you need to know, from boater education to what you might need to have on your motorized vessel, life jacket requirements, the gambit. And there's also a link on Wildlife and Parks' website where you can access information about water sports. Again, I'm saying here, it's your best friend. So you go to ksoutdoors.com, you click on outdoor activities, and then there's going to be a link that refers to canoeing, kayaking, rafting, and so forth. And again, this is offered where most licenses are sold. However, for whatever reason, some places will keep these behind the counter. So if you don't see one out, be sure to ask. You can also download an electronic version of this as well from ksoutdoors.com. Okay, so we've reached our 4th chapter. I'm going to go ahead and stop here to see if we have any questions. I must be the best teacher ever because there are no questions.
Ready to say that.
You girls are going to give me a big head. Oh, Megan, I'm so glad you brought that up. Thank you. So all of the publications I've mentioned so far are also available in Spanish. This is something I'm so proud of, and so I'm almost embarrassed that I forgot to mention this. In fact, I'm going to write myself a note right now to add that to my presentation, so thank you. Yes, all of the publications mentioned, from hunting and fishing to boating, whether it be a regulation summary, which is the summary of all the laws and rules and regulations, or the atlases that let you know where you can recreate, they have been translated to Spanish language versions. Those too are offered at select licensed vendor locations. They too can be downloaded from ksoutdoors.com, or with any of these publications. If you don't have a licensed vendor near you, or you just don't want to have to go over there, that's fine. Call up Wildlife and Parks and we will mail all of those publications to you for free. And that's a great question, Diana. Are the publications free? Yes, that is the best part of all of this. Again, it is a priority for the department that outdoor access to outdoor recreation, that finances not be a barrier. We understand you already have to invest in buying a license or permit. You already have to invest in equipment. So when it comes to accessing information about how to engage in those sports safely and legally, and also where do you go, you shouldn't have to pay for that. So all of those publications are offered for free. Okay, another question, with non-motorized watercrafts, are you restricted in how you move through the lakes, across the lakes, being safe, of course? So to my knowledge, there are not necessarily laws that restrict how you can move about those water bodies. I would definitely defer to our boating education staff or that boating regulation summary to be certain. But what I will tell you is, from a safety perspective, the vast majority of our accidents that occur with non-motorized vessels are when people are on the larger reservoirs and they're out in the open water. This is either because a larger vessel doesn't see them, or these are individuals who have underestimated the amount of energy it took or is going to take to get out to the area that they want to and get back to the shoreline, especially if there's high winds. The other issue is if a storm comes in. So, you know, I know how it is. You get on a kayak and you're just rocking and rolling and you're having a great time and you're feeling great. But the reality is you're going to tire out eventually. You've got the sun beating on you, especially if there's wind and current. We can sometimes underestimate what's going to be required of us. So I would say, from a safety perspective, my recommendation is always to hug the shoreline, especially for fishing. The fishing can be great in those areas. So we don't always necessarily need to go out to the big water. But in terms of actual rules or regulations that prohibit us from doing so, I don't know that those exist. But again, I would check the boating regulation summary to be certain. Great question. Any other questions related to water sports before we move on? We're doing fantastic on time, so no worries if you've got more. Okay, if you do have more, we will get back to them. So let me share again. All right. So let's say you want to go out and recreate. You're not interested in hunting or fishing, and you don't own a kayak, but maybe you're interested in bird watching. Maybe you want to go forage for some mushrooms. Maybe you just want to go for a hike. Maybe you do have a dog you want to train. Where can you do that? I'm proud to share that we do have areas where you can safely and legally engage in those activities. A great place to find those resources is, again, I'm going to keep plugging this website because it's got a lot of fantastic information, is chaosoutdoors.com. So if you go to chaosoutdoors.com and click on, again, outdoor activities, it's going to have information related to hiking, biking, horseback riding. Something to bear in mind is, if this information seems confusing, or you're looking for kind of one-stop shopping when it comes to outdoor recreation, my best recommendation is to go to a state park. A state park is a fantastic area where you know the water is publicly accessible. There's typically lodging available for camping, cabins, and the entire park is going to be open to you bird watching, going on a hike. We've got fantastic trails in Kansas. You can easily forage, and nearly all areas are dog friendly as well. They might need to be leash, but if you're ever needing to know for certain, or you're just, you can always just ask. Our state park managers, our park rangers, and our administrative staff at our parks are super helpful and accommodating. So if you're ever, like I said, just kind of wanting to make things easy, go to a state park. It's going to have everything you need, or visit one of our wildlife areas that are typically adjacent to a state park. So what I'll mention is the places outlined on our website. Even if you're not engaging in hunting or fishing, there are still public lands regulations that might apply. These typically refer to alcohol consumption, driving certain vehicles, those sorts of things. And this is really not because we want to make things difficult or complex. We're just trying to keep people safe. So when we know that there's multiple people engaging in a variety of activities, we want to make sure that everybody has a good time and that everybody gets home safely. So there's some general rules that apply to public lands. And those are listed in the publications I mentioned and on ksoutdoors.com as well. And so, kind of like I alluded to earlier, if a property is leased for hunting or leased for fishing, that's the only allowable activity, which means, like I said, wildlife areas and state parks are here for you, boo. Those are going to be your go-tos. But I don't say that to make you shy away from properties leased for hunting or managed for hunting or fishing activity. It is not meant to scare you. It just means if you want to engage in other activities, in addition to hunting or fishing, these are fantastic places to do that. And like I said, when in doubt, just ask. I did want to do a little plug for something, and this is new because I think more people than I realized are engaged in bird watching. And so something I'm really proud of that the department has launched is the Kansas Birding Trail. So while we use the word trail, we're using it loosely. It's not actually a trail on a map per se that you follow through the state, but what it is there's different trails that offer clusters of areas where you're bound to enjoy really good birding. And so the interesting thing is you'll find that a lot of these properties occur on our state parks. So I encourage you guys, if you're interested in birding at all, or you know someone who likes to bird, tell them to check out the Kansas Birding Trail. It has its own dedicated website, and you can explore the trails that are nearest you and what type of birding experiences you can expect to have, whether you're wanting to go to a wetland or maybe a more forested area, or hit up all of them. And the other thing I'll mention with our birding trails is they have been specifically chosen not only for the birding value, but also for accessibility. So is it easy to navigate to? Are there paved roadways? Am I going to have access to gas and food? So this makes them really user-friendly, really family-friendly. So I highly encourage you to check those out. The other thing I'll mention is whether you're engaging in birding or hunting, fishing, water sports, technology is going to be your friend. So if you haven't already downloaded the department's Go Outdoors Kansas mobile app, I highly recommend this. I'm going to play a quick little YouTube video. This is just a little promo, 30 seconds, I think, that we created to kind of show you the functionality of this app. And just like our publications, it's offered completely free of charge. So hopefully I was tech savvy enough to do this correctly. Let's see. Okay, so hopefully none of you were at work and I just got you in trouble for blasting some audio. But I wanted you guys to be aware that that app exists. And I don't know if you caught it, but on the two bottom tiles, I guess you would call them, there was information like sunrise, sunset, which is super handy if you're going to be heading outdoors to know when's it going to be first light, when do I have to wrap up. And then also there was a tile for check-in and check-out. I don't have a slide dedicated to this, I don't think. Let me see how prepared I am. Nope. But something important to know about, and I'm going to make a note for myself so that the next time I cover this, we've got a slide, is Wildlife and Parks properties offer electronic check-in and check-out. Now, some people might look at that as kind of a nuisance. Oh, that's kind of an annoyance that I have to check in or check out. But I want to tell you about some of the benefits of utilizing that. Now, it's required for public access. You need to be able to check in and check out. There's multiple ways to do it, even if you don't want to do it through the mobile app, but that's probably the easiest. You can call in or do it from a desktop in advance of going out of doors and also returning home. But when you check in and check out, what that does is it gives the department valuable information about which areas people are utilizing most and what types of activities they're engaging in while they're in that area. So that allows us to be strategic with where we put our resources. So we want to make sure that people are having a great time out of doors. And so one of the ways that we do that is by investing in the opportunities that people are utilizing most. So that gives us really helpful data. The other thing is, let's say you go to Byron Walker Wildlife Area and you're going to do some fishing or some hiking while you're there. If there is bad weather on the horizon, or let's say a wildfire has broken out nearby, we have the ability to contact you because we know that you're on that property, and our managers can send out a push notification to let you know, hey, there's a wildfire that's broken out nearby. We recommend that you go ahead and return to your vehicle so that you don't find yourself in a bad position. We can also alert users to opportunities as well. If there's a rare species sighting that's happening while you're on the property, we can notify you of that. And lastly, this isn't something I love to advertise, but if you were ever to have an accident or you were to not return home, or if your family is looking for you, we can utilize this system to see, did you check into a public area? And if so, we can let your family and friends know what time you checked in into what area. And then that will give folks an idea of your last known I don't want to say address, but property that you were accessing. So it's not meant to be a big brother thing. We're not watching you on a little map as you're tracking around. It's really meant to be a resource for both parties. So just a little note about that. And I think, yeah, let's do that open Q&A session now. You are so welcome, Kristen. I'm sure she hopped off, but she said, loved all the info, got to leave early. Thank you for hosting. Absolutely. And Meg, she put in a link for check-in, check-out. Very good. Thank you so much.
Share to us, Nadia, so I'll drop it so everyone can see it.
Okay, great, great.
Go.
Oh, you guys are giving me a big head.
You just did such a wonderful job.
I guess so. I mean, I just nailed it, I guess.
And everybody loves meetings that end early, you know what I mean?
Right, right.
Especially on a Friday.
So let me ask, is there any topic that hasn't been covered that maybe you're still curious about? And I would even open it up to, it doesn't necessarily have to be related to this presentation. Maybe it's just related to outdoor recreation. I'd love to see a beginner's guide to kayaking. I would love to see that too. That's actually a fantastic idea. Linz, I think we probably asked Chelsea if she's aware of any resources that already exist. Or the other thing I'm thinking of is we actually ran an article in Kansas Wildlife and Parks magazine talking about how to get into kayaking and considerations to make when selecting a vessel. You know what? I think, let's see how we'll send out a complimentary copy of that issue of the magazine to our attendees today as a special thank you. And I will make sure that everyone has access to that article. So, Lynn, do you have addresses for all these gals?
I sure do.
Okay. I'm going to take, you are so welcome. I'm going to take a screenshot of these names and I will make sure you gals get a complimentary copy of the magazine with the article about getting into kayaking.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Nadia.
You are welcome. And I don't know about you gals, but Lynn, do you think we should give them a hat too?
Everybody loves a hat. And these hats are so cool.
Just wait a second.
I love these hats. And while she's running off screen really quick before she shows it to you,
Yeah.
that I love the idea of a beginner's guide to kayaking as another mini BOW. I know that that's something that Chelsea and the group has kind of talked about in the past. So that's something we might consider offering down the road.
Yes, that's a great idea. I would love to listen in on that. Okay, I'm going to hit you girls up with these hats too. So I don't know if you can tell, it's kind of like a fun corally orange peachy number. So we'll send you these out along with the magazine. Okay, these you cannot buy in stores. They are super comfy. I think I've got like 3 colors now. So we'll hook you up for attending today as well.
That's amazing. Okay, so everyone that's still attending, I only have email addresses for, but I will reply to the email that I sent with the Zoom link, and I'll ask everyone for their shipping addresses, and then we'll just get everything shipped out to everyone.
Yes. Okay, so it was added, all those things, even tips on literally getting in and out of the kayak in various situations from shore to dock. Yes, I'm like literally thinking of a quick little story here. I went to Whidbey Island, Washington last year. I have family who live out there. And we went on sea kayaks to go crabbing. And I love kayaking. I'm very comfortable kayaking, but sea kayaks are a little bit different. They're built a little bit different because you're on a different type of water body. And I don't know, I swear the holes are smaller too. So I was like, I got in really great. And then we do our crabbing, everything's fine. We get back to shore. And the way you do it there is you like paddle, get up on the sand and kind of beat yourself like a whale. When I wasn't going to get out of that thing. It was like a suction cup. I mean, I am pushing and all sorts of things and I'm just not coming out. I'm like, I'm going to have to live in this thing now. So yeah, I would have really benefited from a guide to let me know how the heck do you get out of the sea kayak once you've had a great time on the water. So bless me, I know it, girl. I'm like, I'm not about to admit that my hips are too wide. Absolutely not. It is the kayak that is the issue. So yeah, we can definitely see about covering those items in a future mini bow. That's awesome.
100%.
Okay.
The equipment is always the problem.
It always.
Rebecca, if you're ever able to join us again for another one of our long weekend BOW events, we usually offer kayaking classes throughout that whole weekend. So if you can join us for that again, highly recommend signing up for one of those classes for your next go around.
And Gina was asking, where's the list of upcoming bow events? I do believe our next big bow, like the fall bow, is September 22nd through the 24th. Does that sound right?
Yep.
But like Lyndsey's been alluding to, there's definitely events in between. So where can gals find that information?
Yeah, so we usually post it on the Kansas Becoming an Outdoors Woman Facebook page, and usually on our social media, either the KS Outdoors or the Kansas Wildlife and Parks social media pages as well. But I highly recommend signing up for the notification email listserv. If you haven't already, I'm getting ready to drop that link here in the chat so you can just access it right away. As soon as we get events that are being scheduled, such as mini BOWs, whether they be in the webinar format or an in-person format, or if registration opens for our big BOW events, or really any other kind of women event or events that we feel like women would be interested in, we'll send an email out with all of the information regarding that. So you'll be the first ones to know, and it'll just get dropped directly into your inbox. So I will drop a link to that here in the chat so everyone has access to it.
Awesome.
I know some of the folks that we had signed up for this signed up because a friend told them about it and they didn't get it directly through that listserv. So that's really exciting.
Wow. Yeah, word of mouth is awesome.
Okay. There is that link. I just dropped it in the chat. Great question.
Oh, Lyndzee, do you want to go ahead and put, I can put it in there, my contact info in case gals have any follow-up questions?
Yeah, I can drop it in there real quick.
If you have any more questions, you're more than welcome to shoot them now. If not, you can send me an email. I will share that address with the caveat that I do get a lot of emails in my inbox. So give me a little bit of time to respond. If it's one of the bow gals, I really will try and answer sooner. I just have that pesky thing in the way called work. And so sometimes I need a little bit of extra time, but Gina, you're so welcome. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I'm glad you guys got some good information. And again, if you want access to any of those printed publications, we can send you a printed copy. We can mail them to you. Or like I said, you can download an electronic version to your computer or tablet. And that handy dandy mobile app has a lot of that information stored in there as well. So be sure to check it out.
Okay, I just dropped Nadia's contact information in the chat. Nadia is very busy, so feel free to reach out to myself or any of the other BOW coordination team members. They were CC'd on that email I sent out with the Zoom information, and all of us are a wealth of knowledge and are happy to help answer any questions that you have or find the answer to the questions that you have, because we're not all experts in everything and it's impossible to know it, but we also love learning. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us if you do have questions.
Yeah.
Nadia, I can't thank you enough. This was so amazing. It was so great. Seriously, I work for the department and I'm coming away with new knowledge. So thank you for sharing your knowledge and your passion for the outdoors with us. And we'll definitely have to schedule another webinar with you because like I mentioned earlier, you're just amazing and we love having you around.
Thank you.
Big thanks to everyone who was able to join us for today's live event. I know it's the Friday of Memorial Weekend and it's never ideal, but I'm thankful that all of you were here to join us. And I hope you were able to take away some golden nuggets, especially with the boating and water safety that Nadia mentioned, and be able to put those to use this weekend. But like I mentioned, if you ever have questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself or Nadia or anyone else on the Becoming an Outdoors Woman coordination team for Kansas. We're happy to answer those questions. Thanks again for joining us. We hope you all have a wonderful and safe Memorial Day weekend. This recording will get sent to you via email and be posted on our YouTube channel. So be sure to share it with all of your friends so that they can also learn more about public access here in Kansas. But stay safe out there, everyone. And we hope to see you in the outdoors.
Bye.